Next news item down comes from Xbox Era's Nick Baker, who said he's heard new information on Monolith's Wonder Woman game. Now, this is I wanted to just note this. This is their first game since 2017's Shadow of War, and their second in almost 10 years, because Shadow of Mordor was 2014. So they're kind of in the same pool as Rocksteady, where they're just underneath Warner Brothers, just going, can we get something out for the love of God, please? And so we have this write-up over on, it's on the Xbox Era podcast, and Nick Baker's talking about it. He was a very, very reliable leaker over the years, saying that he's seen the game, or at least in regards to the information that he's passing on, it's very much gameplay based. So he says the game looks a lot like Gotham Knights. Said there are some visual improvements, but that seems to be the nearest comparison. You use the invisible jet, which is Wonder Woman's signature invisible jet, as it's mentioned as a fast travel method. So I don't think you're actually going to be piloting this thing, but that would make sense if you think about something like Arkham Origins. You pick a place to go, it cutscenes into the jet, and go from there. He says there's a general feeling of a good version of Crackdown in regards to the weight and the traversal and the jumping around, which is a good comparison to make, even though I disagree with the implication that Crackdown was never good in the first place. He mentions that combat uses the lasso of truth to wrap around and slam enemies. Where he mentions Insomniac Spider-Man's web attacks as a comparison. Mentions that the world design includes mobs of enemies, mini-bosses, things like that, with chests and loot drops like boots, braces, torso gear coming with individual stats, just like the newer God of Wars. Now, that's the bit that could go either way. The final thing here is that the game is currently running at 30 FPS, but the team are trying to target a 60 FPS performance mode. So there's a lot in here. The bit about the loot chests and the drops and the loot stuff, that's the thing that lines directly up with David Zaslav, the CEO, wanting more games as a service, wanting more live service components. And that was the thing that killed Gotham Knights in regards to the public perception of it. So thoughts on all this?
It's interesting because I feel like of all the DC characters who you could lootify, Wonder Woman makes the most sense because her design over the years has gone through so many different iterations. You know, you have like the classic look, you have like the biker look from the 90s, which I personally think is very underrated, and then you have like the more armored looks that we've gotten in recent years. And if it's shooting for a mythological vibe and, you know, actually being set in Themyscira and diving into different Greek realms, then, which I really hope it is, because I don't want it to just be a generic open world city thing. I need this thing to lean into what makes Wonder Woman unique as a character. Then I guess that is conducive. Like you say, it depends on how well they do it. If it's like how it was in you know, like if it's like a traditional, you know, RPG Assassin's Creed kind of thing where you just find things and you equip them, and then that makes sense to me. But if it leans more into the live servicey stuff, which, you know, we should say that they've come out and refuted is going to be in the game, then that would be frustrating. The thing that I'm curious about is that I was not expecting the Gotham Knights comparison, because that I was thinking that they would lean more into kind of like a Shadow of Mordor, Shadow of War adjacent style vibe, because the sword combat in that game was so punchy and weighty and would lend itself so well to Wonder Woman. And they mentioned there the lasso being used in combat, which is what I really want. The thing that kind of maybe makes me a little bit anxious there is that they're comparing it to the web attacks from Spider-Man. And I like the combat in Spider-Man, fair enough, but it doesn't feel especially weighty. And I feel if I'm going to be slamming people around with the lasso of truth, I want to see what cool physics things you can pull off with there, you know, wrap it around stuff, almost like the lasso in the Red Dead Redemption games, but wielded by a super strong woman. I want to kind of see that involved. So yeah, the Gotham Knights comparison is curious to me, especially the Crackdown vibes as well, although I guess you do want Wonder Woman to fly around and like be jumpy and stuff. I'm kind of worried now that we're just going to get a kind of a blanket open world and it's going to just be Wonder Woman jumping around and doing things. I think the way you do a Wonder Woman game is to make it more linear and blend the Shadow of War with the Batman Arkham style approach. That's my personal opinion.
See, for me, I like the description of this. Like, I love the Crackdown games. Even Crackdown 3, I would say, is recommendable in terms of just being more Crackdown. But it's one of those things where they need to nail the way that all these different components talk to each other. I think that the loot stuff is a potential cause for concern. Like you said, they did come out and say it's not going to be I forgot the exact phrasing, but it was, it's not going to be a live service game or something like that. I personally think they'll just have a different name for it. There'll still be monetization over time. There'll still be seasons of content or something approximating that. It's only my personal thoughts on it, but I don't see Warner Brothers backing away from that when the CEO himself continues to want to run the thing into the ground. So I guess we'll see how that shakes out. But I like the idea of a big open world set of traversal mechanics and then really good punchy combat. It gives me Prototype vibes. I don't know if you played Prototype.
Yes. Yeah.
But that game was very aggy, it was very angsty. I loved the damn thing. But that had a really good feeling of like drop in, do some cool combat, and then immediately you're back flying away, or you're running up a building or whatever. Hulk Ultimate Destruction vibes as well. And so I would take a modern version of that, like the freedom of that, and as long as they can have it be immediate when you're going from one thing to the next, from traversal to combat, then that could be really, really cool. Nick also mentions that he's not sure about what's happening with the truth mechanic, which has been mentioned quite a lot in the rumors, because of just the way that Shadow of Mordor and Shadow of War handled enemies, where you could grab any of them, you could force them to your side, you could make them reveal different things. But it makes sense that if you're using the Lasso of Truth, one of the character's signature powers, that would also come back in some form. Plus, WB did trademark the Nemesis system back in 2014. It's why we haven't seen it anywhere. So you would assume that they're going to lead the charge with this, that it'll be some sort of building an army, doing some sort of factional warfare thing across an open world, with, like you said, a superhuman, super strong person at the heart of it, kicking the living hell out of everybody. So I kind of like that. I'm more on board with this than I was when it was announced.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking forward to it. Like, Wonder Woman's a really cool character. Like, even though I'm burnt out on superheroes in general, like, there are so many great Wonder Woman comics out there. Monolith, as we know, are a talented studio. If they are allowed to cook, they will cook something really cool. So, yeah, I mean, I'm kind of like just surprised with the Gotham Knights comparisons, because I wasn't expecting that.
I'm not sure if he's just using it as like a fidelity thing. Like, it's just a general sort of comment on like, oh, it reminds him of Gotham Knights. He thinks things will look better going forward. It just seems to be where they're at. But because it wouldn't be the same engine anyway. We're talking about different devs and everything. So it's just maybe it's just a go-to comparison in the moment on a podcast that maybe doesn't have as much meat to it as it might do when we finally see it. We mentioned Game Awards before. Maybe we'll see something at the Game Awards. Assumedly, there's something ready to show. So I guess we'll see. Next news item down is industry analyst over at Circana, Matt Piscatella, noting that Alan Wake 2 was outside the top 150 games played on PlayStation 5. That's been since launch. The game still doesn't have a physical release either. But I just wanted to throw this in. There's just more of a general discussion thing here, because Alan Wake 2 is routinely held up as one of the best games of the year. It's in our top 20 that'll be coming out later in the year as well. And it was nominated a lot at the Golden Joysticks the other week. But yeah, it's very much not in the top 150, which puts it way down the run. There's not a specific number for this, but Piscatella is a known industry analyst, so he's sharing those things. And also, it's worth throwing in that for the Black Friday sales, the Epic's own store had 33% off, even though the game was only a couple of weeks old. So I think it's one of those things where Remedy's games are always word of mouth. Control struggled a lot at launch as well. But general thoughts on Mr. Wake?
I mean, this raises an interesting quandary, doesn't it? Because I feel like, correct me if I'm wrong, the stats over the last few years have said that more people are buying digital compared to physical. Yep. Is digital like outpaced the physical market by that wide a margin?
Oh, yeah.
Bloody hell. Yeah, I mean, God, you can't really say that if it was in physical form, more people would have been picking it up in shops or whatever. I don't know. It's an interesting point, because I think we all agree that when Alan Wake 2 was announced, it was a bit of a surprise sequel announcement, because I think Alan Wake, the original Alan Wake, while it has a cult following, it's never really gone beyond, though. It was a good game kind of reputation. I don't think people were holding up the original Alan Wake as a huge masterpiece. And then we got the weird...
Oh, what to know?
As a huge masterpiece. It's definitely a lot of charm to it, and I'm a big Alan Wake fan, but it's not really something that I was like, that is one of the best games of the generation. I think Control far outpaces it in terms of, pretty much every area. And then you had the direct-to-digital Alan Wake's American Nightmare thing, which is like a weird arcadey shooter. So maybe Alan Wake 2, people look at that, they already think of like a convoluted storyline, they got to go back and obviously play remastered. There's a lot of different things kind of going against its favor there.
I'm so curious as well, because they, having finished Alan Wake 2, that game is confusing AF. Like, I mean, it's one of those things where you need to get absolutely stuck into it. It fundamentally relies on not only the original Alan Wake, but the American Nightmare DLC and Control. You need to have a really good, solid working understanding of all three of those releases, at least I would say, to get something close to some purchase on what's going on in Alan Wake 2. Like, it fires out the gates with a load of information based on those previous titles, especially American Nightmare in regards to a specific character, which I wasn't expecting. That's the only thing I hadn't played.
No one played American Nightmare.
I know! Which I guess is kind of Remedy going like, well, you know what? We're going to make this fundamental and make you go and hunt it down or whatever. But yeah, for Alan Wake itself, I feel like that represents the pivot point for Remedy. Like a lot of people know them as the Max Payne devs, and then Max Payne 3 went to Rockstar, and then they did Alan Wake, which was a lot more surrealist, a lot more Lynchian. I mean, Max Payne had those bits and pieces, but Alan Wake was when they started really steering into it. But because it was an Xbox exclusive, licensing-wise, it was always held up for most of the 2010s, and they only really got it back at the very end of the last decade. And then Control was just full-on like Remedy AF, which is that's what I want from them. But I wonder if like if there is that wing of the fandom that want another Max Payne or want something that's more straightforward, and then when Alan Wake 2 is a survival horror that's a very surrealist experience, and a lot of the discourse around it is just how confusing it is, that makes it hard to pick up. I mean, there was bits and pieces of it, especially in regards to the combat, that I thought were very, very messy and took a long time to get used to. It doesn't knock the overall quality, but it definitely does if you're a more casual fan.
It doesn't help as well that it's released in a hugely busy holiday period for games. You know, it came out a week after Spidey 2, like you just said. Call of Duty, even though that thing sucks, you know, that's a behemoth of an industry title. People are going to be playing Call of Duty. I don't know, it feels like if I was looking at the release of Alan Wake 2, I understand the compulsion to get your spooky game out in time for the spooky season. I would have been personally delaying this until March next year or something. Basically, give it more of a clean break to actually sit in and become, you know, that game. And I want this game to be successful. I've not actually played Alan Wake 2 yet because I've been like saving my money for the holiday period.
I think you'll be indicative of a lot of people either waiting for a holiday sale or just thinking like I'm not prioritizing it because of Spider-Man 2 or something like that.
Yeah, and like I want to replay through Alan Wake Remastered again and also replay through Control, like you said, because you know these are dense narratives that you need to make sure you're fully invested into to get the whole thing out of. So. You know, it's just a shame. I want, you know, Remedy, like one of our great game studios. I need them to be doing well, and it's a shame that, yeah, I think maybe, you know, there was a lot of things going against its favor in terms of finding a widespread mainstream audience. Again, I would have basically been putting this until I would personally have delayed this until next year. As soon as that initial delay came and we were thinking of like having it around the Spider-Man kind of window, I think it should have been moved along.
What I want to mention as well is I mentioned the fact that you need the working knowledge of the previous games because they have only steered into, and Sam Lake, you know, the one of the head writers, like one of the I forget what his specific title at Remedy is in terms of how far back he goes. A very important dude, you know, very much the author of Alan Wake kind of thing, or Remedy, said that, you know, he's very excited about the Remedy shared universe stuff, and that does come into play across Alan Wake 2. But I wonder if that has the opposite effect on the way that it used to feel when the MCU was rolling out, where we used to enjoy picking up the pieces to get the full picture, whereas like now it's a bunch of homework and you've got to go watch all these other things. And I'm weird with it. Like it's not that I don't lose my mind when certain I'm going to keep it very vague, companies or entities are mentioned in Alan Wake 2, and then whatever happens from there. But it only works if you've been there and done the reading or done the things before. I wonder how much that works against them.
Yeah, I mean, it's a novelty, isn't it? I feel like it feels like a pointless addendum to have these. It's cool when Alan Wake and Control crosses over, I guess. I don't know if that's at the forefront of people's minds when they look at this sort of stuff. But yeah, I feel like, again, as the MCU has shown over the last few years, the more you build that house of cards up, the more difficult those house of cards are to actually get into, and then ultimately the easier they are to kind of collapse around them. So yeah, I don't know, because it's not really necessarily fully telegraphed that they've got like this intricate like shared universe thing going on.
Well, they did. It's funny because they got the license back, the IP back for Alan Wake, and then they did the Alan Wake DLC for Control, which was the first crossover thing that we'd had. And then Alan Wake 2 has quite a lot of that stuff going on. But like you said, it's not like you're going in knowing that you should have done the previous things. Like the MCU kind of worked for that period of time because it was expected, even if they didn't advertise it, and you better watch these other three things. That was part of the conversation. And Alan Wake 2 does work by itself. It's just that I would say you're so much better off if you know the previous ones. But yeah, it's an interesting thing. Trying to, I ask quite a lot of someone, just go, I guess I'll check this out. It's been recommended, and then immediately not having any idea what's going on. And then one of the best things that it does is that if you play Control after, like I've been replaying Control after finishing Alan Wake 2, that retrospectively works as a sequel. They kind of both complement each other, so it almost doesn't matter which one you play first. But we're still talking about a very dense, convoluted, messy narrative that you've really got to spend the time unpicking to, like I said, to find some purchase on it. But yeah, as of right now, it's not being played very much, at least on PlayStation, and I guess we'll see what happens going forward.